The wind cut like a blade the night. Everything fell apart for former Army medic Lucas Meyer. A night so cold it felt as if the sky itself had turned against him. A night when he stood shivering outside the small rental he could no longer afford, surrounded by nothing but the sound of distant traffic and the steady breathing of his loyal German Shepherd Ranger, who pressed against his leg, tried to comfort him while the landlord's door slammed behind them, final and uncaring, leaving Lucas, homeless, jobless, and carrying only a backpack, a blanket, and the aching memory of a life that once had order and purpose, but had slowly crumbled since returning from deployment. And as he looked out at the frozen Montana landscape stretching endlessly in the moonlight, he wondered how much more man could lose before he simply disappeared into the cold like a ghost with no name or place in the world. If you believe in kindness and second chances, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to support more stories like this and help keep them alive for others who need hope. That night, Lucas walked for miles along the highway's shoulder, boots slipping on packed ice, breath burning his chest, Ranger trotting faithfully at his side, as if nothing in the world could shake his devotion. And with each step, Lucas replayed the last few months of struggle. The night shift he couldn't keep because panic attacks hit without warning, the savings drained by medical bills, the friends who loved him but had their own families to support, the job applications that led nowhere, and the quiet humiliation of falling through every safety net he thought existed, until the eviction notice felt like the final confirmation that it failed not only himself, but everyone who once believed in him. As dawn approached, he saw a small roadside sign pointing toward a rural auction lot, and with no plan except to keep moving, he followed the gravel path until he reached a field scattered with rusted farm equipment, broken trailers, and weather-beaten structures tagged with peeling price stickers, and among them stood a curved metal Quonset hut barely larger than a shed, its steel ribs showing through layers of chip paint, a structure most people would not even glance at twice. But to Lucas, in that moment it looked like shelter, possibility, a small piece of survival he might actually afford. The handwritten tag hanging crookedly from its door read $8, a price so low it seemed like a mistake. And when he asked the auction clerk why it was priced cheaper than a fast food meal, the man shrugged and explained it was too old, too dented, too warped for any rancher to want. But Lucas didn't care. He bought it with the last cash in his pocket, signed the papers with trembling hands, and walked away with ownership of something small but real, something no one could kick him out of again. Transporting it was another challenge entirely, but an elderly rancher, seeing Ranger licking frost from his beard and sensing the quiet desperation in Lucas's voice, offered to haul the Quonset to an abandoned piece of land outside town where old railway workers used to camp, a patch of legal public use ground where no one would bother him for a while. When they arrived, the place looked desolate, frozen grass bending in harsh wind, skeletal trees groaning under the weight of winter, yet it was still land where he could breathe, and for Lucas that was enough. He spent the next week assembling the Quonset with numb fingers, using scavenged bolts, scrap lumber for framing and plastic sheeting for insulation, while Ranger kept watch, tail thumping softly whenever Lucas paused to catch his breath, as if reminding him he wasn't building alone. At night, the temperature dropped to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, and Lucas and Ranger huddled under blankets inside the unfinished hut, breaths forming icy clouds in the dark as the wind howled through gaps in walls. But slowly, day after day, the structure transformed into something livable, something shaped not by tools or money, but by the raw determination of a man who refused to disappear. The first real turning point came when a local mechanic named Adam spotted Lucas gathering scrap metal behind the auto shop and recognized him as the medic who once saved his cousin overseas. Without explanation, Adam loaded his truck with insulation rolls, a propane heater, a used wood stove, and armfuls of worn-out tools, driving them out to Quonset and dropping them off with nothing more than a brief nod before leaving. And though Lucas was never one to cry easily, he sat inside the hut that night with tears burning his eyes, because kindness, when it comes unexpectedly, hits like sunlight through storm clouds on the darkest morning. With proper insulation, the Quonset became warmer, the stove crackling like a heartbeat in the center of the hut, casting long flickering shadows across metal walls patched with tin roofing pieces Lucas found in dumpsters. And with Ranger curled near the fire, paws twitching in dreams, the place began to feel less like a last resort and more like a rough, humble home held together with grit and hope. Still, survival was brutal. The coldest storm of the decade arrived early, dropping temperatures to minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit and sweeping across the valley with winds powerful enough to knock over small sheds and uproot fence posts. And as Lucas reinforced the Quonset with rope and salvaged plywood, his mind raced with fear that everything he had built could collapse in one night. When the storm finally hit, the world outside disappeared into a white roar, snow slamming against the metal like fists trying to break through, and even with the stove burning at full heat, ice crept across the inside walls, while Ranger whimpered and pressed close, sensing Lucas's worry. Hours passed like slow-moving shadows, and then a booming crack split the night as a nearby old cottonwood tree fell, shaking the ground and nearly crushing Quonset's frame, but somehow it held. In the heart of the storm, Lucas realized the structure was stronger than it ever looked, stronger than anyone assumed, and perhaps stronger because he had built it by hand, reinforcing it with every ounce of what he had left. When morning came, sunlight pierced through storm clouds like gold spilling across the snow, and the Quonset stood firm among drifts piled taller than Ranger, smoke rising steadily from the stovepipe, a quiet testament to resilience that felt almost miraculous. News traveled fast in small towns, and soon journalists and neighbors came to see the man and dog who had survived the minus 47 degrees Fahrenheit storm in an $8 hut, calling it a symbol of grit, ingenuity, and hope in impossible odds. With their attention came offers, donations, job interviews, community support. And though Lucas was grateful, the greatest change came not from material help, but from the way people began treating him again with respect, seeing not a broken veteran, but a builder, a survivor, a man who refused to give up even when the world felt cold enough to kill. As winter thawed into a slow, pale spring, the once desolate land around the Quonset began to sprout new life, patches of green pushing through melted snow. Birds returned to branch tips, and with warmer weather, Lucas expanded the structure using reclaimed boards and sheet metal, adding a small sleeping loft, a dog bed made from repurposable coat, and a workbench where he began crafting metal art pieces shaped from scraps, pieces he later sold at the local farmer's market for more money than he expected. Each piece represented a fragment of his journey, curved steel like the spine of the Quonset, wings cut from Barnton symbolizing second chances, and Ranger-shaped silhouettes capturing loyalty forged through hardship. And with every sale, Lucas felt pieces of his confidence return, the kind he once carried proudly as a medic, the kind he thought he had lost forever. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe, because your support helps these stories reach others who may be fighting battles in silence. As summer approached, Lucas stood one evening outside the Quonset with Ranger sitting beside him, warm breeze brushing against his face, the metal hut glowing softly in the golden hour light. And for the first time in years, he felt not haunted by his past, but quietly proud of his present, proud of the ground beneath his feet and the shelter built with his own hands, proud of surviving a winter that should have broken him, but instead shaped him into someone stronger, steadier, and more certain of his place in the world. Before we end, please comment below what part of the story moved you the most or inspired you the most. And so the veteran who was kicked out with nowhere to go found an $8 Quonset that became far more than shelter. It became a testament to endurance, a home built from scraps and courage, a symbol that even from the coldest moments of life, something unbreakable can rise, especially when built by the hands of a man who refuses to surrender and the heart of a dog who never leaves his side.